She thought she'd ruin his birthday with one unexpected guest, his ex-wife. But the CEO's mother had no idea she was triggering something far darker. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Evelyn Matthews adjusted her pearl necklace in the mirror, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. The reservation was made, the invitations sent, and now came the pièce de résistance, the guest list. Her manicured finger traced down the names until it reached the one that made her smile broaden. Alexandra Harrington, her son's ex-wife. That should make for an interesting evening, she murmured to herself, setting down her reading glasses. At 68, Evelyn retained the regal bearing and calculated mind that had helped her late husband build Matthews Enterprises from a small manufacturing firm into an international conglomerate. Now helmed by her only son, James, the company had tripled in value over the past decade. James had always been exceptional: Harvard Business School, strategic vision, ruthless when necessary. The perfect successor. Perfect in business, perhaps, but his personal choices left much to be desired, especially Alexandra. The divorce had been finalized 3 years ago, yet James had never fully explained what happened. The tabloids speculated wildly: infidelity, irreconcilable differences, power struggles. Evelyn suspected it was simply Alexandra's inadequacy. The woman had been an environmental lawyer when they met, always fighting against the very industries that created their wealth. How James had ever thought that match would work remained a mystery. Evelyn picked up her phone and dialed her assistant. "Margaret, confirm that Ms. Harrington received her invitation, would you? And make sure the seating arrangement places her directly across from James." "Mrs. Matthews, are you certain about this? Mr. Matthews was very specific about—" "I'm quite certain, Margaret. It's my gift to him. Sometimes we need to face our past to appreciate our present." After hanging up, Evelyn moved to the window of her penthouse overlooking Central Park. The autumn leaves created a tapestry of oranges and reds against the urban landscape. James's 40th birthday deserved something memorable, something that would remind him of the bullet he'd dodged with Alexandra and make him appreciate the new direction she was helping guide his life. Evelyn had already arranged several introductions with suitable women over the past year: daughters of business associates, a senator's niece, even a European countess. James had been polite but uninterested. Perhaps seeing Alexandra again would jolt him back to reality, remind him why moving on was necessary. Her phone buzzed with a message from Margaret. "Ms. Harrington has confirmed attendance." Perfect. Evelyn hadn't expected Alexandra to decline. The woman had always been ambitious, and an invitation to the social event of the season, even one where she might face uncomfortable encounters, was too valuable to pass up. Networking opportunities would be abundant, and Alexandra had always been strategic. The birthday celebration would be held at the Monarch, Manhattan's most exclusive venue. 500 guests from the upper echelons of business, politics, and society would attend. The Matthews name still commanded that level of respect. James would be furious when he saw Alexandra, of course. His temper, so carefully controlled in business, could flare unexpectedly in personal matters. But he wouldn't make a scene, not with so many important connections present. He would maintain composure while Evelyn watched his reaction, gauging whether he still harbored feelings for his ex-wife. If he did, Evelyn would redouble her efforts to find a suitable replacement. If not, the evening would still serve as a reminder of her influence and his dependency on her social orchestrations. The intercom buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. "Mrs. Matthews, Mr. Davies is here to discuss the final arrangements for the event." "Send him up." Bernard Davies, the premier event coordinator in New York, had handled Matthews' family functions for 20 years. He understood Evelyn's expectations perfectly. "Mrs. Matthews," Bernard greeted her with a slight bow as he entered, leather portfolio tucked under his arm. "I've brought the final floor plan and menu for your approval." They spent the next hour reviewing details: the imported orchids, vintage champagne, string quartet for cocktail hour followed by the 12-piece orchestra for dancing. Everything had to be impeccable. "There's one additional matter," Evelyn said as they concluded. "Alexandra Harrington will be attending. Ensure she's seated at table 1, directly across from James." Bernard's eyebrows rose slightly, but his professional demeanor remained intact. "As you wish, Mrs. Matthews. Though perhaps I should mention, Mr. Matthews specifically requested that any seating arrangements be cleared with him first. James has enough to worry about with the Singapore merger. Leave these details to me." After Bernard departed, Evelyn poured herself a small sherry, her one indulgence. The warm liquid spread through her chest as she contemplated the upcoming event. Everything in her life had been calculated, including her marriage to Richard Matthews 50 years ago. He'd been ambitious but unpolished. She'd provided the social graces and connections that elevated their status. Together, they'd created a legacy. James was that legacy's inheritor, but sometimes he needed guidance. Alexandra had been a detour, a youthful mistake. The divorce had been necessary, though messier than Evelyn would have liked. Now it was time to ensure James stayed on the right path, with the right kind of partner. Evelyn had already identified several candidates attending the party. Vivian Chen, whose family controlled shipping routes throughout Asia, would be particularly valuable given the company's expansion plans. Or perhaps Caroline Wellington, whose father's banking connections could prove useful for future acquisitions. The party would set the stage for these introductions, and Alexandra's presence would serve as the perfect counterpoint, a reminder of what happened when one chose passion over pragmatism. What Evelyn couldn't have anticipated was that her careful planning would unravel in ways she never imagined. That by pulling this particular thread from James's past, she would unknowingly begin to unravel a tapestry of secrets she never knew existed. Secrets that, once exposed, could not be contained again. Had she known what would transpire that night, perhaps Evelyn Matthews would have left Alexandra Harrington's name off the guest list. But then again, perhaps not. Evelyn had always prided herself on her ability to control outcomes. It never occurred to her that some things remained beyond her reach. James Matthews stared at the projection screen in his office, watching as the quarterly figures scrolled past. His CFO, Michael Keaton, was midway through a presentation on the Singapore acquisition, but James found his attention drifting. The morning sunlight glinted off the glass skyscrapers outside his window, casting fractured reflections across the polished surface of his desk. "These projections show a 14% increase in market share by Q2 next year," Michael was saying. "Conservative estimates, of course." "And the regulatory hurdles?" James asked, pulling his focus back to the matter at hand. "We've got a team working with the Singapore authorities. Nothing we can't handle." James nodded, making a note on his tablet. At 40, 39 for another 3 days, he had achieved more than most accomplished in a lifetime. Matthews Enterprises operated on 6 continents, employing over 50,000 people. The business press called him visionary. Competitors called him ruthless. Both were accurate. "That's all for now," James said, rising from his chair. "Send me the complete analysis by end of day." As Michael gathered his materials, James's assistant, David, appeared in the doorway. "Sir, your mother's assistant called. She's confirming your availability for the final tasting at the Monarch this afternoon." James suppressed a sigh. His mother's elaborate birthday plans had expanded from a simple dinner to what now resembled a coronation. "Tell her I'll be there at 4. When David left, James moved to the window, gazing down at the city below. 40. The milestone felt significant, though he couldn't articulate exactly why. Perhaps because it marked a decade since his father's death, a decade of proving himself worthy of the Matthews legacy. His phone vibrated with a text message. He glanced down, expecting another meeting request or update from the legal team. Instead, he saw Alexandra's name. "We need to talk before the party. Coffee tomorrow?" "The usual place, 9 a.m. James stared at the message. a complex wave of emotions rising in his chest. He hadn't spoken to Alexandra in months, their communication limited to occasional emails about financial matters from the divorce. Why was she contacting him now? And what did she mean by the party? The realization hit him with sudden clarity. His mother. She wouldn't have. He quickly dialed Margaret, his mother's assistant. Matthew's residence. Margaret, it's James. The guest list for Saturday. Is Alexandra on it? A hesitation. Yes, Mr. Matthews. Mrs. Matthews added her last week. James ended the call without responding, his jaw clenched. This was exactly the sort of manipulation his mother excelled at, using social occasions as strategic maneuvers. He should have expected it, should have demanded oversight of the guest list. Now he had a potential disaster on his hands. His relationship with Alexandra had ended badly, though the public never knew the full story. The official narrative, crafted by the company's PR team, described an amicable split due to career differences. The reality was far more complicated. James texted back, "The usual place, 8 a.m. He would need to coordinate with Alexandra before the party, establish boundaries. The last thing he needed was for her to say something that would disrupt the carefully constructed facade they'd maintained since the divorce." David reappeared. "Sir, your 11 o'clock is here, and your mother is on line 1. Tell my 11 o'clock I'll be 5 minutes. I need to take this call." James picked up the phone, preparing himself for the confrontation. "Mother." "James, darling, how are you?" Evelyn's voice carried the cultured tones of old Manhattan money, despite her middle-class origins. "Why is Alexandra on the guest list?" No preamble, no pleasantries. They had always communicated this way, directly, efficiently. "I thought it was time to mend fences," Evelyn replied, unfazed by his abruptness. "It's been 3 years, James. Surely you can be civil for one evening. This isn't about civility. You know exactly what you're doing. I'm creating an opportunity. Alexandra still moves in influential circles. Her environmental work has given her considerable political capital. Having her there sends a message that Matthews Enterprises is forward-thinking, open to dialogue with former critics." It was a perfectly rational explanation. His mother was a master at presenting personal agendas as business strategies. "Remove her from the list," James said flatly. "I'm afraid that's impossible. She's already confirmed her attendance. Uninviting her now would create unnecessary gossip." James closed his eyes, recognizing the checkmate. "We'll discuss this later. I need to go." He hung up without waiting for her response, trying to quell his rising anger. His mother had always been manipulative, but this crossed a line. The party would be full of business associates, potential partners, and competitors, all watching his interaction with Alexandra. One wrong move could spark rumors that might affect stock prices or the Singapore deal. James took a deep breath, composing himself before his next meeting. He would handle this as he handled all challenges, with strategic precision. He would meet with Alexandra, establish parameters for their interaction at the party, and ensure nothing disrupted his carefully constructed world. What he couldn't know was that both he and his mother were miscalculating. Alexandra wasn't the same woman who had walked away 3 years ago, and the events set in motion by Evelyn's invitation would unearth secrets that all parties had worked hard to keep buried. As James welcomed his next appointment, he pushed thoughts of Alexandra and his mother aside. The Singapore acquisition needed his full attention. Personal matters would have to wait. Later that afternoon, as his car navigated through midtown traffic toward the Monarch, James found himself thinking about the last time he had seen Alexandra. It had been at the courthouse, the day their divorce was finalized. She had looked at him with a mixture of regret and resignation, as if she had expected their relationship to end exactly as it did. "You'll get what you wanted," she had said quietly. "I hope it's worth it." At the time, he believed it was. The divorce had been necessary, a surgical excision of a relationship that threatened everything he had built. Alexandra's idealism, Her refusal to compromise had become incompatible with his position as CEO. At least, that was what he had told himself. The car pulled up to the Monarch, its ornate facade a testament to Gilded Age excess. As James stepped out, he steeled himself for an hour of his mother's micromanagement of the party details. Cake flavors and champagne selections seemed trivial compared to billion-dollar acquisitions, but he knew better than to dismiss anything Evelyn deemed important. What he didn't realize was that the most consequential event of his week wouldn't be the Singapore deal or even his lavish birthday celebration. It would be tomorrow's coffee with Alexandra, a meeting that would set in motion the unraveling of everything he thought he knew about his past, his family, and the company that bore his name. Alexandra Harrington stood at the window of her Brooklyn apartment, coffee mug warming her hands as she watched the early morning light spread across the city. The Manhattan skyline gleamed in the distance, a daily reminder of the world she had both embraced and rejected. The invitation to James's birthday celebration lay on her kitchen counter, expensive cream cardstock with gold embossing. She had been surprised to receive it 3 weeks ago, immediately recognizing Evelyn's hand in the matter. James would never have invited her himself. Alexandra took another sip of coffee, considering her response to James's text. Moving their meeting earlier suited her fine. She had a court appearance at 11. The real question was why she had agreed to attend the party at all. She had spent 3 years carefully reconstructing her life without the Matthews name and influence. Now she was voluntarily stepping back into their orbit. Her phone rang, pulling her from her thoughts. The caller ID showed her law partner's name. "Morning, Marcus." "Tell me you're not really going to that party," Marcus said without preamble. "I saw the invitation on your desk yesterday." Alexandra sighed. "I'm still deciding." "No, you're not. You've already RSVP'd yes. What I can't figure out is why." She moved to her kitchen, setting down her mug. "It's complicated. It's masochistic is what it is. That family nearly destroyed you, Alex." "That's an exaggeration." "Is it? You were hospitalized, remember? The stress-induced collapse after those Matthews Enterprises lawyers spent 6 hours grilling you in deposition?" Alexandra winced at the memory. The divorce had been brutal. Not because James wanted her money, she had signed an ironclad prenup, but because he seemed determined to discredit her, to paint her as unstable and vindictive, all to protect the company's image. "This isn't about rehashing the past," she said. "It's about closure." Marcus scoffed. "Closure is therapy and ice cream, not walking into the lion's den in Louboutins. I appreciate your concern, but I've made my decision. I'm meeting James for coffee tomorrow to set ground rules." "Ground rules?" "Alex, listen to yourself. You sound like you're preparing for psychological warfare. With the Matthews family, that's exactly what it is." She glanced at her watch. "I need to get ready for court. The Wilson briefing is on your desk." After ending the call, Alexandra moved to her bedroom to dress. Marcus wasn't wrong to be concerned. The divorce had nearly broken her, not just emotionally but professionally. The Matthews legal team had been relentless, digging into her past, her work, her finances. She had weathered the storm, but only barely. So why was she going back for more? Alexandra slipped into her court attire, a charcoal suit that projected confidence and competence. As she fastened a simple silver necklace, her reflection stared back with eyes that had seen too much. The woman in the mirror was different from the idealistic environmental lawyer who had fallen in love with James Matthews at a climate change fundraiser 7 years ago. That woman had believed in the possibility of change from within, that by marrying into one of the world's most powerful industrial families, she could help steer Matthews Enterprises toward sustainability. Such naivety seemed laughable now. What she hadn't counted on was James's transformation after his father's death. The man she married, passionate, visionary, willing to challenge the old guard, had gradually morphed into someone else. Someone colder, more calculating, someone like Evelyn. Alexandra checked her briefcase, ensuring she had all the documents for today's hearing. The Wilson case was important, a group of tenants fighting eviction by a developer with political connections. The kind of case that reminded her why she had become a lawyer in the first place. Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. "Car downstairs. Court in 45. As she headed for the door, Alexandra cast one last glance at the invitation. Attending the party was risky, but necessary. Not for closure, as she'd told Marcus, but for something else entirely. Something she wasn't ready to articulate, even to herself. Across town, Evelyn Matthews was inspecting the ballroom at the Monarch, Bernard Davies at her side. The space had been transformed into an elegant wonderland. Crystal chandeliers reflecting light onto walls draped in midnight blue silk, tables adorned with white orchids and silver candelabras. "The ice sculpture will be delivered Saturday morning," Bernard was saying, "and the chef has prepared the tasting menu for this afternoon's approval." Evelyn nodded, making a note in her small leather notebook. "And the seating arrangements?" "Finalized as you requested. Ms. Harrington at table 1, directly across from Mr. Matthews." "Perfect." Evelyn smiled, imagining the scene, James's surprise when he saw Alexandra, the inevitable tension, the opportunity to showcase how completely he had moved on. "And Vivian Chen?" "At Mr. Matthews's right, as you specified." Evelyn had considered the seating carefully. Vivian Chen was exactly the kind of woman James should align himself with. Intelligent, connected, from a family that understood business dynasties. The comparison with Alexandra would be stark and, Evelyn hoped, illuminating for her son. As Evelyn continued her inspection, her phone rang. She recognized her doctor's number. "Dr. Parker, I wasn't expecting your call until next week. Mrs. Matthews, I've received your test results. I'd like you to come in this afternoon." Something in his tone made Evelyn pause. "Is there a concern?" "I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Can you come at 3? I have a tasting scheduled then. Would 4:30 work?" "That's fine. I'll see you then." Evelyn slipped the phone back into her purse, pushing aside a flutter of unease. At her age, medical tests were routine, likely nothing significant. "Mrs. Matthews?" Bernard prompted. "About the champagne selection?" "Yes, let's proceed with the Dom Pérignon Rosé for the toast and the Cristal for general service." They continued their rounds, but Evelyn found her thoughts drifting. The party had to be perfect, a showcase not just of the Matthews' wealth and influence, but of James's position at the apex of New York society. A reminder to everyone, including Alexandra, of what was lost when she chose principles over pragmatism. What Evelyn couldn't admit, even to herself, was that Alexandra's absence had changed James in ways that troubled her. He had become more isolated, more driven. The sharp edges that had always defined his personality had hardened further, as if the divorce had removed some essential counterbalance. Not that Evelyn would ever acknowledge she might have been wrong about Alexandra. The girl had been unsuitable, her environmental crusading directly at odds with Matthews Enterprises' core businesses. The marriage had been doomed from the start, a rebellion on James's part that needed to run its course. "That completes our walkthrough," Bernard said, closing his portfolio. "Unless you have other concerns?" Evelyn surveyed the ballroom once more, visualizing it filled with New York's elite. "It's perfect, Bernard, as always." As she departed, Evelyn's thoughts turned to her upcoming doctor's appointment. A mild annoyance, nothing more. Her focus needed to remain on the party and its potential to reset James's personal trajectory. Alexandra's presence was merely a catalyst, a reminder of paths not to be taken. Little did Evelyn know that her carefully orchestrated evening would indeed change trajectories, but not in the way she intended. The seeds she was planting would bear fruit far more bitter than she could imagine. The coffee shop was tucked away on a quiet street in Greenwich Village, far from the financial district where Matthews Enterprises dominated the skyline. James had arrived 15 minutes early, securing a corner table that offered privacy. He nursed an Americano, watching the door with a carefully neutral expression. At precisely 8 a.m., Alexandra walked in. James felt an unexpected tightness in his chest as he observed her. Confident stride, hair shorter than he remembered, the same purposeful intensity in her eyes. She wore a tailored navy suit, professional but without the ostentatious designer labels that Evelyn preferred. This was Alexandra as he had first met her. Competent, uncompromising, authentic. She spotted him immediately, navigating between tables with a slight nod of acknowledgement. James stood as she approached, an ingrained courtesy his mother had instilled. "James," she said, setting down her briefcase before taking the seat opposite him. "Alexandra, thank you for coming." The barista approached, and Alexandra ordered a cappuccino. They sat in strained silence until the drink arrived, each measuring the other for changes that 3 years had wrought. "You look well," James offered finally. "So do you. Singapore's keeping you busy, I hear." Of course she would know about the acquisition. Despite their separation, Alexandra had always maintained connections within the business world, a necessity for her environmental law practice. "I assume you know why I wanted to meet," James said, dispensing with small talk. "Your mother's invitation." Alexandra took a sip of her cappuccino. "I was surprised to receive it. That makes 2 of us. I didn't know she had invited you until yesterday." Classic Evelyn. A ghost of a smile played on Alexandra's lips. "Still orchestrating from behind the scenes." James leaned forward slightly. "Why did you accept?" The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken history. Alexandra set down her cup, considering. Curiosity partly, and perhaps a sense that we left things unfinished. "The divorce was finalized 3 years ago. Everything is quite finished." "Is it?" Alexandra's gaze was steady. "We both know the official story isn't the whole truth." James tensed. This was exactly what he had feared. Alexandra reopening old wounds, raising questions best left buried. "The past is past, Alexandra. I'm only concerned with ensuring Saturday evening isn't uncomfortable for either of us. Or damaging for Matthews Enterprises' stock price?" There was a sharpness to her tone now. "Don't worry, James, I won't cause a scene." "I never said—" "You didn't have to." She leaned back, studying him. 3 years, and you're still exactly the same. Everything reduced to risk assessment and damage control. The accusation stung, partly because he recognized its truth. James had always approached personal relationships with the same analytical precision he applied to business, measuring costs against benefits, calculating acceptable losses. "What do you want, Alexandra?" "I want to understand why your mother suddenly decided I should attend your birthday party after 3 years of pretending I never existed." James exhaled slowly. "She claims it's about optics, showing Matthews Enterprises is open to dialogue with environmental advocates. And you don't believe that?" "My mother never does anything for just one reason. She's playing some angle, but I haven't figured out what it is yet." Alexandra nodded, unsurprised. "So this meeting is to ensure I don't inadvertently aid whatever scheme she's hatching?" "This meeting," James said carefully, "is to establish that we can interact civilly for one evening without resurrecting the past." Alexandra was silent for a moment, tracing the rim of her cup with one finger. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "Some parts of the past can't stay buried forever, James." He felt a chill at her words, a premonition of something shifting beneath the surface of their conversation. "What does that mean?" "It means I accepted your mother's invitation for my own reasons, not hers." Alexandra reached for her briefcase, extracting a slim folder, and not entirely out of curiosity. She slid the folder across the table. James stared at it without opening it. "What is this?" "Information I think you should have before Saturday night." James opened the folder slowly, revealing several printed pages of financial records and what appeared to be internal company memos, documents he had never seen before. "Where did you get these?" His voice had dropped to a near whisper. They were sent to me anonymously about 6 months ago. I've been verifying their authenticity before deciding what to do with them." James scanned the documents, his expression darkening. "These implicate my father in—" "Yes," Alexandra cut him off. "I know." He closed the folder, sliding it back toward her. "Why bring this to me now?" "Because despite everything, I believe you deserve to know the truth before it becomes public." She pushed the folder back. "Keep it. I have copies." "Are you threatening me?" Alexandra's expression hardened. "If I wanted to threaten you, I would have taken this to the SEC, not to you personally in a coffee shop." James studied her face, searching for deception or hidden motives. He found none, only the straightforward intensity that had first attracted him to her. "This information could destroy Matthew's enterprises," he said finally. "I'm aware of that." "Then why—" "Because I think you're still the man I married somewhere underneath all this." She gestured vaguely toward his immaculate suit, his carefully maintained appearance. "The man who once cared about more than share prices and acquisitions." James felt something shift inside him, a mixture of anger, confusion, and an emotion he couldn't immediately identify. Regret, perhaps, or longing for a simpler time before his father's death had thrust him into the role he now occupied. "I need time to verify these," he said, tapping the folder. "You have until Saturday. After the party, I need to make a decision about next steps." Alexandra stood, gathering her belongings. James rose as well, still processing the implications of what she had shown him. "Why did you really accept my mother's invitation, Alexandra?" She paused, her expression softening slightly. "Maybe I wanted to see if anything remained of what we once had. Or maybe I just wanted to look Evelyn Matthews in the eye when she realizes she's not as in control as she thinks." With that, she turned and walked out, leaving James standing beside the table, the folder heavy in his hand. Across town, Evelyn sat in Dr. Parker's office, her posture rigid as she absorbed what he was telling her. The words washed over her: advanced stage, aggressive treatment, limited options, but she processed them with the same analytical detachment she applied to business matters. "How long have I had this condition without knowing?" she asked when he paused. Dr. Parker adjusted his glasses. "Based on the progression, I would estimate at least a year, possibly longer. The symptoms can be subtle until it reaches this stage." "And the prognosis without treatment?" 6 months, perhaps less. "With treatment? We might extend that to a year, possibly 18 months with aggressive intervention. But I need to be clear, we're talking about extending life, not curing the condition." Evelyn nodded, her mind already calculating implications, contingencies, necessary arrangements. "I understand. I'd like to review the treatment options." As Dr. Parker outlined various protocols, Evelyn found her thoughts drifting to James and the upcoming birthday celebration. The timing was inconvenient, to say the least. She had plans for James, for the company, for the legacy she and Richard had built, plans that required her guidance and influence. "Mrs. Matthews, do you have questions about what I've explained?" Evelyn refocused on the doctor. "Just one. Can we delay treatment until after this weekend? My son's 40th birthday celebration is Saturday, and I'd prefer not to begin anything that might affect my appearance or energy levels before then." Dr. Parker frowned. "I wouldn't advise delay, but a few days won't make a significant difference at this stage." "Good. I'll schedule the first treatment for Monday then." As she left the medical building, Evelyn felt strangely calm. The diagnosis was unwelcome but not entirely unexpected at her age. What mattered now was ensuring that James was properly positioned before her condition became known. The party had taken on new significance, not merely a social occasion, but potentially her final opportunity to set certain wheels in motion. What Evelyn couldn't have known was that those wheels were already turning, driven by forces she hadn't anticipated, forces that Alexandra Harrington had just set in motion in a quiet coffee shop in Greenwich Village. James spent the next 2 days in a state of controlled chaos. By day, he oversaw final negotiations on the Singapore acquisition, his external demeanor betraying none of the turmoil beneath. By night, he pored over the documents Alexandra had provided, verifying their authenticity through discreet channels. What he found left him shaken to his core. The evidence was irrefutable. Richard Matthews, the father he had idolized, the businessman whose ethics he had strived to emulate, had knowingly covered up a series of environmental disasters caused by Matthews Enterprises' operations in Southeast Asia. Not minor infractions, but massive contamination events that had devastated local communities, poisoned water supplies, birth defects, cancer clusters. Worse, his father had actively worked to discredit the scientists and journalists who tried to expose the truth, using the company's considerable resources to silence whistleblowers through intimidation and bribery. And based on the timeline, these cover-ups had continued until Richard's death 10 years ago, which meant that for the past decade, James had been unwittingly perpetuating his father's legacy of deception. Now, as his driver navigated through Saturday evening traffic toward the Monarch, James tried to center himself for the performance ahead. 500 guests would be watching him, expecting the confident, commanding CEO they were accustomed to seeing. Not a man whose foundations had been shattered by revelations about his father, and by extension, the company that bore their name. "We've arrived, sir," his driver announced, pulling up to the ornate entrance. James adjusted his bow tie and exited the car, nodding to the photographers stationed outside. The paparazzi were a necessary evil at events of this caliber. Matthews Enterprises' PR team would ensure the right images appeared in the right publications. Inside, the Monarch had been transformed exactly as his mother had envisioned, opulent yet tasteful, a showcase of wealth that stopped just short of ostentation. Bernard Davies greeted him at the entrance to the grand ballroom. "Mr. Matthews, happy birthday. Your mother is already inside, greeting early arrivals." James spotted Evelyn across the room, resplendent in midnight blue Valentino, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. She was engaged in animated conversation with the mayor and his wife, but her eyes darted occasionally to the entrance, watching for his arrival, no doubt. As he made his way through the growing crowd, accepting birthday wishes and engaging in the expected pleasantries, James kept one eye on the door. Alexandra hadn't yet arrived, but her presence loomed in his consciousness, overshadowing even the revelations about his father. What exactly did she intend to do with the information? And why warn him first? "There's my boy." Evelyn's voice cut through his thoughts as she approached, champagne flute in hand. She kissed him on both cheeks, a European affectation she had adopted decades ago. "Happy birthday, darling." "Mother." James accepted the glass she handed him. "Everything looks beautiful." "Of course it does. Bernard has outdone himself." Her eyes narrowed slightly, studying him. "You seem distracted." "The Singapore deal is at a critical stage. Surely you can set business aside for one evening? This is a celebration, James." Before he could respond, he felt her stiffen beside him. Following her gaze, he saw Alexandra entering the ballroom, and his breath caught involuntarily. She wore a simple emerald gown that contrasted strikingly with her dark hair. No flashy jewelry or accessories, Alexandra had never needed such embellishments. She carried herself with quiet confidence, nodding to a few acquaintances as she moved into the room. "I see you didn't uninvite her," James said, keeping his voice low. "As I explained, it would have created unnecessary gossip." Evelyn's tone was smooth, but James detected an undercurrent of irritation. "I should greet her. We are hosts, after all." James placed a restraining hand on his mother's arm. "I'll handle it." He intercepted Alexandra before she had fully entered the main ballroom, guiding her to a relatively quiet alcove near one of the massive floral arrangements. "You came," he said, unable to keep a note of surprise from his voice. "I said I would." Alexandra's gaze was direct, assessing. "Have you reviewed the materials?" "Yes." We need to discuss this further, but not here." She nodded, understanding the need for discretion. "After the party, then. My place, midnight." James handed her a business card with his private address written on the back. Alexandra slipped it into her clutch. "Your mother is watching us like a hawk." Indeed, Evelyn had positioned herself to maintain visual contact while appearing engaged in conversation with a senior senator. Her talent for multitasking had always been remarkable. "She'll expect me to bring you to her," James said. "Prepare yourself." Alexandra's lips quirked in a half-smile. "I've faced tougher opponents than Evelyn Matthews." As they approached Evelyn, James noted how his mother's expression shifted, the practiced smile remaining in place while her eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. "Alexandra, how lovely to see you," Evelyn said, extending her hand. "It's been too long. Mrs. Matthews, thank you for including me tonight. But of course, Matthews Enterprises has always valued diverse perspectives." Evelyn's gaze flicked to James. "Especially now, with our renewed focus on environmental responsibility." The pointed comment wasn't lost on Alexandra. "Yes, I've been following your company's recent initiatives with interest." "All part of James's vision for the future," Evelyn said, deftly shifting credit to her son. "He's transformed the company these past 10 years. James felt a stab of discomfort at the praise, knowing what he now knew about his father's legacy, and by extension his own unwitting complicity. "If you'll excuse me," Alexandra said, "I should say hello to some colleagues." As she moved away, Evelyn's smile dimmed. "She seems well, though that dress is rather understated for an occasion like this." "Not everyone measures success by designer labels, Mother." Evelyn arched an eyebrow at his tone. "I merely observed that she might have made more of an effort for your birthday celebration." Before James could respond, Bernard approached to inform them that dinner would be served shortly. The moment to confront his mother about Alexandra's invitation and the seating arrangement he had already noticed on the chart had passed. Throughout the elaborate 5-course dinner, James maintained the expected social niceties while acutely aware of Alexandra seated directly across from him. She engaged politely with those around her, including Vivian Chen to his right, whose father's shipping empire would be instrumental in the Singapore expansion. "Your ex-wife is quite articulate," Vivian commented quietly as the dessert course was served, though her views on industrial regulation seem rather at odds with Matthews Enterprises' interests. "Alexandra has always had the courage of her convictions," James replied. "An admirable trait, though perhaps inconvenient in a corporate wife." The observation, delivered with a smile, carried an unmistakable subtext. Vivian understood the game being played and her potential role in it. She was offering herself as a more suitable partner, one who comprehended the necessities of business dynasties. Under normal circumstances, James might have been receptive to the subtle overture. Vivian was intelligent, accomplished in her own right, and connected to family interests that aligned with his own. Exactly the kind of alliance his mother had been promoting. But the circumstances were far from normal. The documents Alexandra had shown him had changed everything, forcing him to reevaluate not just his father's legacy, but his own role in perpetuating it. As coffee was served, James noticed his mother speaking intently with Bernard, who then approached the orchestra. The music shifted to a waltz, his mother's favorite. Right on cue, the MC announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Matthews will now open the dancing with his mother, Mrs. Evelyn Matthews." This, too, had been choreographed by Evelyn, a public display of filial devotion and maternal influence. James dutifully rose and extended his hand to his mother, leading her to the center of the dance floor. "You seem preoccupied tonight, James," Evelyn observed as they began to waltz. "Is it Alexandra's presence that's troubling you or something else?" "I'm fine, Mother. You forget how well I know you." Her eyes, so similar to his own, studied him with unsettling acuity. "Something's happened. Is it the Singapore deal?" Nothing for you to worry about." Evelyn's grip on his hand tightened slightly. "I've dedicated my life to this family and this company, James. Everything I've done has been to secure your future, our legacy." The music swelled around them as they turned, other couples now joining them on the dance floor. Over his mother's shoulder, James caught sight of Alexandra watching from the edge of the room, her expression unreadable. "I know, Mother," he said, returning his attention to Evelyn. "You've always done what you thought was best." Not thought, knew. There was a new intensity in her voice. "A Matthews always protects their own, James. Never forget that." As the dance ended, James felt a chill at his mother's words. They carried an echo of something he had read in his father's private memos, justifications for actions taken to protect the company, to protect the family. The same rationalization used to cover up the environmental disasters that had destroyed countless lives. The evening continued its choreographed progression: toasts, the cutting of an elaborate cake, more dancing. Through it all, James maintained his public persona while his mind raced with implications of what he had learned and what he might yet learn when Alexandra arrived at his penthouse later that night. What neither James nor Evelyn realized was that Alexandra wasn't the only one with secrets to reveal. The night was about to take a turn that none of them had anticipated. Evelyn observed the party from a quiet corner, a flute of champagne untouched in her hand. The celebration was unfolding exactly as she had orchestrated: New York's elite mingling beneath crystal chandeliers, business competitors eyeing each other across tables laden with orchids, political figures engaged in careful conversation with potential donors. Yet something was off. James was performing his role with the expected polish, but she detected an unusual tension in his interactions. The way his gaze kept returning to Alexandra throughout the evening suggested more than lingering attachment to his ex-wife. They had spoken privately. That much was clear. But about what? "Mrs. Matthews, is everything to your satisfaction?" Bernard appeared at her elbow, clipboard in hand. Always attentive to the smallest details, he had been her most trusted event coordinator for decades. "The evening is progressing beautifully, Bernard, though I believe it's time for a small adjustment to our schedule." She nodded toward the orchestra. Bernard understood immediately, moving to confer with the conductor. Moments later, the music transitioned to a familiar waltz, one that had been played at James and Alexandra's wedding reception. Evelyn watched as recognition flickered across both their faces. James, in conversation with the Chinese ambassador, faltered momentarily. Alexandra, accepting a glass of water from a server, froze with the glass halfway to her lips. A small test, Evelyn thought, and both had failed spectacularly. Whatever connection remained between them, it was stronger than she had anticipated. This would require a more direct intervention. Evelyn made her way across the room, stopping to exchange pleasantries with various guests until she reached Alexandra, who stood alone near one of the tall windows overlooking the city. "It seems we've programmed the same music as your wedding reception," Evelyn said, her voice light but her eyes sharp. "Pure coincidence, I assure you." Alexandra turned to face her. "Nothing you do is coincidental, Evelyn." "Such suspicion." Evelyn smiled thinly. "And after I made a point of including you tonight." "Yes, let's talk about that." Alexandra set down her glass. "Why did you invite me, really?" "Perhaps I felt it was time to put the past behind us, for James's sake." "James didn't know I was invited until after I'd accepted, so this isn't about him, it's about you." Evelyn's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "You always were direct, Alexandra. It's one of the qualities that made you so unsuitable as a corporate wife." "I'll take that as a compliment." "You're welcome to take it however you wish." Evelyn glanced toward James, who was watching their interaction with barely concealed concern. "What did you and my son discuss when you met before the party?" Alexandra raised an eyebrow. "You have me followed?" "Don't be dramatic. James's calendar is shared with his executive assistant, who naturally keeps me informed of significant appointments." Naturally, Alexandra's tone was dry. Our conversation was private. Nothing is private when it concerns Matthews Enterprises. That's where you're wrong, Evelyn. Some things are deeply personal, even for a Matthews. Before Evelyn could respond, a server approached with a message that the mayor was asking for her. She excused herself, but as she walked away, an unfamiliar sensation prickled at the base of her neck. Apprehension. Alexandra knew something significant enough to cause the subtle shift she'd observed in James's demeanor. Across the room, James was engaged in conversation with a Supreme Court justice, but his attention was divided. He had observed the interaction between his mother and Alexandra, noting the tension in their postures despite their superficial smiles. When Evelyn moved away, he saw Alexandra slip out onto the terrace. Making his excuses to the justice, he followed, finding her alone at the stone balustrade, gazing out at the city lights. "What did she say to you?" he asked without preamble. Alexandra didn't turn. She wanted to know what we discussed when we met. "And what did you tell her?" "Nothing." Now she faced him. But she knows something's happening. She's like a shark that sensed blood in the water. James ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration that he normally suppressed in public. "I can handle my mother." "Can you? You haven't so far." The comment stung because it contained a kernel of truth. Despite his position as CEO, despite his financial independence, James had never fully extricated himself from his mother's influence, her expectations, her vision for his life and the company. "That's not fair, Alexandra. Isn't it? Look at tonight. This entire production is Evelyn's creation, down to the seating arrangement that placed me directly across from you and that Chen woman at your right hand. Vivian is a potential business partner. She's your mother's idea of a suitable replacement for me." Alexandra's voice softened. "The question is, do you agree with her assessment?" Before James could respond, the terrace door opened. Michael Keaton, his CFO, stepped out, expression grave. "James, I need a word. It's urgent." James nodded to Alexandra. "Excuse me." He followed Michael to a quiet corner of the ballroom away from guests. "What is it?" "I just got a call from our contact at the Wall Street Journal. They're running a story Monday morning about environmental violations at our Indonesian operations." James felt his stomach drop. "What do they know?" "Details are unclear, but they mentioned specific incidents from the early 2000s. They've requested comment from the company." The time frame aligned perfectly with the documents Alexandra had shown him, the operations his father had covered up. "Hold them off. Tell them we'll have a statement Monday morning." "James, if this is true..." "I'm aware of the implications, Michael. Just buy me some time." As Michael departed, James scanned the room for Alexandra. She was now engaged in conversation with a group that included several prominent environmental activists, people whose presence at a Matthews event would have been unthinkable a few years ago. Had she leaked the documents? It seemed unlikely given her warning, but James couldn't dismiss the possibility entirely. He needed to find out exactly what she knew and what she intended to do with that knowledge. Tonight. The party continued its glittering progression, but James felt increasingly detached from the proceedings. He performed his role mechanically, accepting congratulations, discussing potential ventures, laughing at political jokes that weren't remotely amusing. All the while, his mind raced with possibilities. If the journal published what they knew, the repercussions would be seismic. Not just for Matthews Enterprises' stock price, but for its entire operational model. The company had built its reputation on being tough but fair, aggressive in business but ethical in practice. That reputation would be shattered overnight. As midnight approached, guests began to depart. James stood at the entrance, thanking each one for attending, his smile fixed and hollow. Alexandra had left 30 minutes earlier after a brief exchange confirming their meeting. Evelyn joined him for the final farewells, every inch the gracious hostess despite the late hour. "A tremendous success," she declared as the last guest departed. "You made quite an impression on Vivian Chen. Her father called me personally to express interest in deepening their relationship with Matthews Enterprises. That's good news, James responded automatically. Evelyn studied him, her gaze penetrating. You've been distracted all evening. Is it work, or was seeing Alexandra more difficult than you anticipated? I'm fine, Mother. Just tired. Perhaps, or perhaps there's something you're not telling me. She placed a hand on his arm. James, whatever it is, remember that we are Matthews. We face challenges together. For a moment, James was tempted to confide in her, to share the burden of what he had discovered about his father, but something held him back. The same instinct that had kept him from fully trusting his mother with his feelings about Alexandra years ago. It's nothing serious, he said instead, just the usual pre-acquisition jitters. Evelyn didn't appear convinced, but she didn't press further. I should head home. It's been a long day. I'll have my driver take you. No need. Bernard arranged a car. As they parted outside the Monarch, Evelyn embraced him with unusual intensity. Happy birthday, my son. Remember that everything I've ever done has been for you and the company. The statement, delivered with such earnest conviction, sent a chill through James. It echoed too closely the justifications in his father's private memos. In the back of his town car, heading toward his penthouse where Alexandra would be waiting, James reflected on his mother's words. Both his parents had professed to act in his best interests and those of the company. But at what cost? What actions had they justified in the name of protecting the Matthews legacy? And more importantly, what was he prepared to do now that he knew the truth? His phone vibrated with a text from Alexandra. I'm here. As the car approached his building, James steeled himself. Tonight would change everything. His understanding of his father, his relationship with his mother, and the future of Matthews Enterprises. What he couldn't have anticipated was that Evelyn Matthews had set in motion her own plans for the evening. Plans that would collide with his in ways none of them had foreseen. Alexandra stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of James's penthouse. The city sprawled below like a carpet of lights. The space was exactly as she remembered. Minimalist, expensive, impeccably designed. Everything in its proper place, a reflection of James himself, or at least the James he had become. She heard the elevator doors open behind her but didn't turn immediately. She needed this moment to compose herself, to remember why she was here. You found the place all right? James's voice, closer than she expected. Now she turned. He had removed his bow tie, the top button of his shirt undone, the smallest concession to informality. Your doorman remembered me. Alexandra accepted the glass of water he offered. He seemed surprised to see me. Peter's been with the building for years, since we were married. An awkward silence descended. 3 years of separation stretched between them, filled with unspoken recriminations and regrets. James broke first. The documents you showed me, you said they were sent anonymously. Yes, a package delivered to my office 6 months ago. No return address. And you've verified their authenticity? Alexandra moved to the couch, setting down her glass. As much as possible without access to Matthews Enterprises' internal systems. The financial records match public filings when cross-referenced with dates and subsidiaries. The metadata on the digital files checks out. James joined her, maintaining a careful distance. Why would someone send this to you specifically? I've been asking myself the same question. She met his gaze directly. The most logical explanation is that whoever sent them knew about our relationship, knew that I might be motivated to expose environmental violations, but also that I might hesitate because of my connection to you. Which brings us to the real question. James leaned forward slightly. What do you intend to do with this information? That depends. On what? On you. On what you do now that you know the truth about your father's actions. James stood abruptly, moving to the bar where he poured himself a scotch. The controlled facade he'd maintained throughout the evening was beginning to crack. My father is dead, Alexandra. Whatever he did or didn't do, he can't be held accountable now. But the company can be. You can be. I didn't know about any of this until you showed me those documents. I believe you. Alexandra's voice softened. That's why I came to you first instead of taking this to the press or the authorities. James took a long drink, his back still to her. The Wall Street Journal is already onto the story. My CFO informed me tonight. That wasn't me. He turned, studying her face. I didn't think it was. The timing's wrong. They wouldn't have had time to verify if you'd just leaked it. So someone else has the same information. It appears so. James returned to the couch, sitting closer to her this time. Alexandra, do you realize what this will do to Matthews Enterprises if it goes public? The stock will plummet. Thousands of jobs could be lost. The company my grandfather built, that my father expanded. The company that poisoned villages in Indonesia. Alexandra interjected quietly. That covered up birth defects and cancer clusters. That silenced whistleblowers through intimidation and bribery. James flinched as if she'd struck him. I had no knowledge of those operations. But now you do. The question is, what will you do about it? Before he could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowning. It's my mother. At this hour? You should take it, James answered, his expression shifting from concern to alarm as he listened. When? Yes, of course. I'll meet you there. He ended the call, already on his feet. I have to go. My mother's been taken to Mount Sinai Hospital. What happened? She collapsed at home. Her housekeeper found her and called an ambulance. Alexandra stood as well. I'll come with you. That's not necessary. James. She placed a hand on his arm. Whatever is between us, I wouldn't let you face this alone. He hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. In the elevator down to the garage, they stood in tense silence. Alexandra observed James from the corner of her eye, the rigid set of his shoulders, the muscle working in his jaw. Despite everything that had happened, she still knew him well enough to recognize when he was containing fear. James's driver was waiting with the car. During the ride to the hospital, James made several calls, to Evelyn's personal physician, to the hospital administration ensuring privacy, to Michael Keaton informing him of the situation. Alexandra sat quietly, giving him space to handle the crisis. But her mind was working, processing this unexpected development in the context of everything else that was unfolding. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Evelyn Matthews wasn't the type to collapse from exhaustion after hosting a party, no matter how elaborate. She was made of sterner stuff, which meant either a genuine medical emergency or something calculated. At Mount Sinai, they were immediately escorted to a private wing. A doctor met them in the corridor outside Evelyn's room. Mr. Matthews, your mother is stable now. She experienced what appears to be a severe hypoglycemic episode, possibly related to medication she's taking. Medication? For what condition? The doctor hesitated. I believe that's a conversation you should have with your mother. She's awake and asking for you. James turned to Alexandra. Wait here? She nodded, watching as he disappeared into the hospital room. Taking a seat in the private waiting area, Alexandra contemplated the series of events that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, when the anonymous package arrived at her office, she had been tempted to take the information directly to the authorities. The environmental violations documented were severe, the cover-up extensive. As an environmental lawyer, she had a professional obligation to expose such abuses. But there was James to consider. Despite the bitter end to their marriage, despite the pain of the divorce, she had never stopped caring for him. And she believed, perhaps naively, that the man she had fallen in love with, principled, visionary, determined to modernize his father's company, still existed beneath the hardened exterior he now presented to the world. So she had waited, verifying the information, considering her options. When Evelyn's invitation arrived, it had seemed like fate, an opportunity to approach James directly. to give him a chance to address his father's sins before they became public knowledge. Now, with the Wall Street Journal already onto the story and Evelyn's sudden collapse, the situation had become infinitely more complex. Inside the hospital room, James stood at his mother's bedside, stunned by what she had just revealed. "How long have you known about this diagnosis?" Evelyn, pale against the white hospital linens but still somehow commanding, met his gaze steadily. "I received confirmation on Thursday. The prognosis is not favorable. And you didn't tell me immediately because I didn't want to overshadow your birthday celebration." She reached for his hand. "James, there are things we need to discuss. About the company, about the future." "The company can wait, Mother. Your health, my health is what it is." Her tone was matter of fact. "What matters now is ensuring that everything your father and I built is protected." James felt a chill at her words. "Protected from what exactly?" Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. "From anything that might threaten it. James, I've dedicated my life to building Matthews Enterprises into what it is today. I won't see that legacy destroyed. Even if that legacy is built on lies, on covering up environmental disasters that killed people." The words escaped before he could stop them. Evelyn's hand tightened around his, her expression shifting from surprise to calculation in an instant. "Alexandra showed you the documents." It wasn't a question. James pulled his hand away, staring at his mother in dawning comprehension. "You knew about everything Father did in Indonesia." "Of course I knew." Evelyn's voice was steady. "I was your father's partner in every sense. We made those decisions together to protect the company, to protect you and your future. People died, Mother. Business involves difficult choices, James. Your father understood that. I thought you did too." James stepped back from the bed, a physical manifestation of his growing horror. "Did you send those documents to Alexandra?" "Don't be absurd. Why would I expose our family to that kind of risk?" "Then who did?" "That's what we need to find out." Evelyn struggled to sit up straighter. "James, listen to me. Whatever Alexandra has told you, whatever she's planning to do with those documents, we can contain this. We've handled worse. Worse than covering up deaths? Than poisoning entire communities? Stop being so melodramatic. Those operations were necessary for the company's growth at a critical time. The alternative was bankruptcy, losing everything your grandfather had built." James shook his head, unable to reconcile this cold calculation with the mother he thought he knew. "There's always an alternative to what Father did, what you apparently helped him do. And now you need to help me protect what we built." Evelyn's voice took on an urgency he rarely heard. "The Wall Street Journal story can be stopped. We have connections, leverage, but we need to act quickly. You know about the Journal story too?" "I know everything that threatens Matthews Enterprises, James. That's my job, to see threats before they materialize." Outside in the waiting area, Alexandra checked her watch. James had been with his mother for nearly 30 minutes. She was considering whether to leave when the door to Evelyn's room opened and James emerged. One look at his face told her everything she needed to know. "She knew," he said quietly, sitting beside her, "about all of it. She helped my father cover it up." Alexandra reached for his hand, an instinctive gesture of comfort. "I'm sorry, James. She wants me to help her bury it again, to use the company's influence to kill the Journal story." "And what do you want?" James looked at her, his expression raw with conflict. "I don't know. I've spent my entire life trying to live up to my father's legacy. Now I discover that legacy is built on suffering and deception. What does that make me?" "It makes you someone with a choice," Alexandra said softly. "A choice your father made differently." Before James could respond, his phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it, his expression darkening further. "What is it?" Alexandra asked. "Michael, the Journal isn't waiting until Monday. They're publishing the story online tomorrow morning. James, a nurse called from the doorway. Your mother is asking for you again. She says it's urgent. James stood, then turned back to Alexandra. Will you stay? The question contained layers of meaning beyond the immediate situation. Alexandra nodded. I'll be here when you come out. As James disappeared back into Evelyn's room, Alexandra felt the weight of the moment. Whatever happened next would determine not just the future of Matthew's enterprises, but the future of her relationship with James, and his relationship with the truth his parents had hidden for so long. Evelyn's hospital room was dimly lit, the medical equipment casting shadows on the walls. Despite her condition, she had managed to apply lipstick and arrange her hair, maintaining appearances even now. Close the door, she instructed as James entered. What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room. James remained standing, keeping his distance from the bed. I think we've had enough secrets, Mother. This isn't about secrets, it's about survival. Evelyn adjusted herself against the pillows. The journal story is only the beginning. If we don't contain this immediately, there will be investigations, lawsuits, possibly criminal charges. Maybe there should be. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Don't be naive. The statute of limitations has expired on most of these incidents. All an investigation would do is destroy the company's reputation and stock value. Thousands of employees would suffer, pension funds would be decimated, all for what? Justice for events that happened decades ago? For accountability, James countered. For acknowledging the harm that was done instead of continuing to hide it. And what would that accomplish beyond salving your conscience? Evelyn's voice sharpened. Alexandra has filled your head with idealistic nonsense. This is business, James. Our business. Our legacy. A legacy built on lies. A legacy built on difficult decisions that ensured our survival. Evelyn leaned forward, her intensity undiminished by her surroundings. Your grandfather started with nothing, built this company through 2 recessions. Your father expanded it globally during some of the most challenging market conditions in history. Do you think that was accomplished without compromise, without sacrifice? There's a difference between compromise and criminal negligence, Mother. The lines aren't as clear as you think. Evelyn reached for a leather portfolio on her bedside table. What I'm about to show you needs to remain between us. James hesitated, then stepped forward to take the portfolio. Inside was a series of documents, financial statements, legal agreements, and photographs. What am I looking at? Evidence that could destroy several prominent political figures, a federal judge, and 2 of our largest competitors. Evelyn's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. Insurance, collected over decades. Your father called it our resilience strategy. James leafed through the documents with growing disbelief. Compromising photos of a Supreme Court justice. Financial transactions linking a prominent senator to offshore accounts. Evidence of bid rigging by competing corporations. This is blackmail material. This is leverage, Evelyn corrected. We've never had to use most of it. Its existence alone has been sufficient to ensure certain protections. And you think I should use this to suppress the journal story? To continue the cover-up? I think you should use every tool at your disposal to protect what 3 generations of Matthews have built. Evelyn's expression softened slightly. James, I understand your moral qualms. I do. But consider the greater good. Matthews Enterprises employs thousands. Our philanthropic foundation funds hospitals, schools, research centers, all built on a foundation of corruption, built on pragmatism. Evelyn sighed, a rare display of weariness. The world isn't black and white, James. Your father understood that. I had hoped you did too. James closed the portfolio, his decision crystallizing. I can't do this, Mother. I won't. Because of Alexandra? Has she truly influenced you so much? This isn't about Alexandra. It's about who I am, who I want to be. Evelyn studied him, her expression calculating. And who exactly is that, James? The righteous crusader exposing family secrets at the cost of everything we've built? The repentant son atoning for sins he didn't commit? What exactly do you think will happen after you've torn down your father's legacy? I'll build something better, something honest. A bitter laugh escaped Evelyn. You sound exactly like you did when you first brought Alexandra home, full of ideals, disconnected from reality. Maybe I was right then. Maybe I lost my way. Or maybe you're having a midlife crisis, triggered by seeing your ex-wife again. Evelyn's voice hardened. Think carefully before you make any irreversible decisions, James. Once certain doors are opened, they cannot be closed again. Is that a threat, Mother? It's a reality check. Evelyn gestured to the portfolio. That isn't even a fraction of what I've accumulated over the years. There are things in my private safe that would shock even you, things involving people you trust implicitly. James felt a chill at her words. Like who? Like Michael Keaton, for one. Did you know he was feeding information to Alexandra's legal team during your divorce? Or that Bernard Davies has been embezzling from the Matthews Foundation for years? I've let it continue because he's useful in other ways. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand the world you're operating in. Evelyn reached for his hand, which he reluctantly gave her. James, I don't have much time left. My doctors have been clear about that. When I'm gone, you'll need to be stronger than ever, more pragmatic, more strategic. Or I could choose a different path entirely. At what cost? Evelyn's grip tightened. Do you really think Alexandra wants reconciliation? She's using you, James. Using your lingering feelings for her to advance her environmental agenda. You don't know her motives. I know she accepted my invitation immediately. I know she brought those documents to you rather than the authorities. I know she's waiting outside right now despite your divorce and everything that happened between you. Evelyn's eyes bored into his. What does that tell you? James pulled his hand away. It tells me she has integrity, that she wanted to give me a chance to address this directly before it became public. Or it tells you she still has feelings for you, feelings she's willing to manipulate to achieve her goals. The suggestion hung in the air between them. James had considered this possibility himself, that Alexandra's approach might be strategic rather than personal. But something in him rejected the idea. The Alexandra he knew, even after everything, wouldn't operate that way. I trust her more than I trust you right now, Mother. The words landed like a physical blow. Evelyn's composure slipped, revealing a flash of genuine hurt before her mask reasserted itself. Then you're a fool. A sentimental fool who's about to destroy everything your family has built. Maybe it needs to be destroyed. Maybe that's the only way forward. Evelyn's expression hardened. If you go down this path, don't expect me to protect you from the consequences. I don't need your protection. Don't you? Evelyn reached for the call button beside her bed. There are things about your own involvement in company operations that wouldn't withstand scrutiny, James. Things you've signed off on without full understanding. Things that could implicate you personally. James felt his stomach drop. What are you talking about? The Singapore acquisition, for one. Did you review all the environmental impact assessments personally? Or did you trust the summary Michael provided? The same Michael who's been feeding information to Alexandra's former colleagues? Before James could respond, a nurse entered the room. Everything all right, Mrs. Matthews? I'm feeling quite tired, Evelyn said, her voice suddenly frail. I think I need to rest now. Of course. Mr. Matthews, perhaps you could continue your visit tomorrow? Your mother needs her strength. James nodded, his mind reeling from his mother's implications. As he turned to leave, Evelyn called after him. Think carefully about your next steps, James. Some decisions can't be undone. In the waiting area, Alexandra stood as James emerged. One look at his face told her the conversation had not gone well. What happened? James glanced around, aware of the potential for others to overhear. Not here. Let's go. They walked in silence through the hospital corridors, James's expression growing darker with each step. In the car, he directed his driver to take them back to his penthouse before finally speaking. My mother has been collecting blackmail material for decades, on politicians, judges, competitors, apparently everyone who might pose a threat to Matthew's enterprises. Alexandra absorbed this without visible surprise. That tracks with what I've learned about her over the years. She wants me to use it to suppress the journal story, to continue the cover-up. And what do you want to do? James looked out the window, the city lights blurring as they passed. I don't know. She implied that I might be legally vulnerable myself, that there are things in the Singapore acquisition that could implicate me personally. Is that possible? I've always trusted my team to handle the details. Environmental assessments, regulatory compliance. I review summaries, not every document. Then your mother might be right, Alexandra said quietly. If there are issues with Singapore, you could be legally exposed. James turned to her, his expression pained. She also suggested that you might have ulterior motives for approaching me with those documents, that you're using my feelings for you to advance your environmental agenda. Alexandra was silent for a long moment. Do you believe that? I don't know what to believe anymore. James rubbed his temples. 6 hours ago, I thought I understood my life, my family, my company. Now everything is upside down. For what it's worth, Alexandra said carefully, I came to you first because I believed you deserved to know the truth before it became public. Whatever happened between us personally, I never doubted your integrity. The car pulled up to James's building. As they rode the elevator to his penthouse, a weighted silence hung between them. The events of the night had shifted something fundamental in their relationship, reopening old wounds while simultaneously creating new connections. In the penthouse, James went straight to the bar, pouring himself another scotch. Alexandra declined when he offered her one. The journal is publishing tomorrow morning, she said. You need to decide what you're going to do. What would you do if you were me? Alexandra considered the question seriously. I would get ahead of the story, make a public statement acknowledging what happened, expressing regret, and outlining concrete steps to make amends. That would destroy the company's stock value overnight. Yes, it would, but sometimes you have to tear something down to rebuild it properly. James took a long drink, the amber liquid burning a path down his throat. My entire life has been dedicated to building this company, Alexandra, to living up to my father's expectations. If I do what you're suggesting, everything changes. Everything has already changed, James. The only question is whether you control the narrative or let it control you. He set down his glass, turning to face her fully. Why did you really accept my mother's invitation? After everything that happened between us, you could have sent those documents anonymously. You could have gone directly to the authorities. Why approach me personally? Alexandra met his gaze steadily. Because despite everything, I still believe in you, in the man I married, the one who wanted to transform Matthew's enterprises into something better than what his father had built. That man might not exist anymore. I think he does. Alexandra stepped closer. I think he's right here, wrestling with his conscience. The James Matthews who's only concerned with stock prices and appearances wouldn't be having this conversation. He'd already be on the phone with his PR team, crafting denials and preparing legal challenges. For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of their shared history and the current crisis hanging between them. Then James's phone rang, Michael Keaton again. I need to take this, James said, stepping away. As he spoke with his CFO, Alexandra moved to the windows, gazing out at the city. The night had taken turns she couldn't have anticipated when she accepted Evelyn's invitation. But beneath the complications and revelations, one thing had become clear. She still cared deeply for James, perhaps more than she had been willing to admit, even to herself. The question now was whether the man she had loved still existed beneath the corporate facade, and whether he would choose truth over the legacy his parents had constructed through decades of deception. Dawn broke over Manhattan, painting the skyline in hues of gold and pink. James stood at his penthouse windows, watching the city awaken. He hadn't slept, his mind too active with revelations and decisions. Behind him, Alexandra dozed on the couch, having refused to leave him alone with his thoughts. They hadn't rekindled anything physical, but her presence provided a comfort he hadn't expected, a reminder of simpler times, before the weight of the Matthews legacy had fully settled on his shoulders. His phone vibrated on the coffee table. The journal story was live. Matthews Enterprises linked to deadly environmental disasters in Southeast Asia. The headline was followed by a detailed exposé, including many of the same documents Alexandra had shown him, plus additional evidence he hadn't seen before: witness testimonies, medical records from affected communities, internal emails from Matthews executives discussing how to conceal the contamination. His father featured prominently in the reporting, portrayed not as the visionary businessman celebrated in his obituaries, but as a ruthless corporate leader willing to sacrifice human lives for profit. There were mentions of Evelyn too, though less prominently, references to her role in managing the company's public image during the period in question. James's own name appeared only in passing, noting that he had taken over as CEO following his father's death and had continued many of the operational strategies established during the Richard Matthews era. The implications were clear. While not directly implicated in the cover-up, James had benefited from and perpetuated the systems his father had created. "It's out, isn't it?" Alexandra was awake, watching him from the couch. James nodded, handing her the phone. She read silently, her expression grave. "They have more than I showed you. Someone with deep inside access provided this. My mother thinks it might be Michael Keaton. She claims he was feeding information to your legal team during our divorce." Alexandra looked up sharply. "That's not true. We never had an inside source at Matthews. Everything we used in the divorce proceedings was publicly available or obtained through proper discovery." "You're certain?" "Absolutely. Your mother is manipulating you, James, creating suspicion to isolate you from people you trust." James ran a hand through his hair, disheveled from the sleepless night. "My phone's already blowing up. PR, legal, the board members. Everyone wants to know how we're responding." "What are you going to tell them?" Before he could answer, his phone rang again, a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Matthews?" A woman's voice, professional but with an underlying urgency. "This is Nurse Ramirez from Mount Sinai. Your mother is asking for you. Her condition has deteriorated overnight." James felt his stomach drop. "I'll be right there." As he ended the call, Alexandra was already gathering her things. "Your mother?" "They say she's worse. I need to go to the hospital. I'll come with you." In the car, James scrolled through the barrage of messages and emails that had accumulated since the journal story broke. The company's stock had plummeted in pre-market trading. The board was calling an emergency meeting. Media outlets were requesting comments. Environmental groups were organizing protests outside Matthews Enterprises headquarters. "It's all falling apart," he murmured, more to himself than to Alexandra. She placed a hand on his arm. "Not falling apart. Changing. There's a difference." At the hospital, they were directed immediately to Evelyn's room. The doctor met them outside, his expression grave. "Mrs. Matthews experienced significant cardiovascular distress during the night. We've stabilized her, but her overall condition is fragile. The cancer has spread more aggressively than initially thought." "Cancer?" James felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath him. "What cancer?" The doctor frowned. I assumed you knew. Your mother was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She received the confirmation just days ago." James leaned against the wall, struggling to process this new information. His mother was dying. Had known she was dying even as she orchestrated his elaborate birthday celebration. even as she invited Alexandra, setting in motion the chain of events that had led to this moment. "Can I see her?" The doctor nodded. "She's conscious but quite weak. Please keep the visit brief." Inside the room, Evelyn appeared shockingly diminished, her normally immaculate appearance disrupted by medical necessity, her commanding presence reduced by physical frailty. But her eyes, when they fixed on James, remained as sharp and calculating as ever. "The journal story," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's worse than we anticipated." No greeting, no acknowledgement of her condition. Straight to business, even now. "You have cancer." James moved to her bedside. "Why didn't you tell me?" It wasn't relevant to the situation at hand. "Not relevant? Mother, you're dying." All the more reason to focus on what matters. Evelyn's gaze shifted past him. "I see you brought her with you again." Alexandra stood in the doorway, maintaining a respectful distance. "I can wait outside." "No need. This concerns you too." Evelyn adjusted herself against the pillows, grimacing with the effort. "The damage control options I outlined last night remain our best strategy. James, there's a safe in my home office. The combination is your birth date. Inside, you'll find everything you need to pressure the journal's publisher." "I'm not doing that, Mother." "Then Matthews Enterprises is finished. The stock is already in free fall. By market close, we'll have lost billions in value. Maybe that's the price we have to pay for what Father did, for what you helped him cover up." Evelyn's expression hardened despite her weakness. "You're willing to destroy generations of work because of misplaced guilt? These events happened decades ago, in countries with different environmental standards. People died, Mother. Children were born with defects. And Father knew, you knew, and you chose to hide it rather than take responsibility. We chose to protect the company, to protect you and your future." "My future?" James laughed bitterly. "Look at where we are now. The truth is out. The company is in crisis, and you're still trying to manipulate events from your hospital bed." Evelyn's gaze shifted to Alexandra. "This is your influence. You've turned my son against me, against his own legacy." "James makes his own decisions," Alexandra replied calmly. "He always has." "Has he? Or has he simply traded my influence for yours?" Evelyn turned back to James. "She never stopped pursuing her agenda, James. Even now, she's using you to achieve what she couldn't accomplish during your marriage, the dismantling of Matthews Enterprises." James felt a surge of anger. "Stop trying to turn me against her. Alexandra showed me those documents because she believed I deserved to know the truth. She could have taken them directly to the authorities." "And why didn't she?" Evelyn pressed. "Because she still has feelings for you? Or because she knew approaching you personally would be more effective in achieving her goals?" "Both can be true," Alexandra said, stepping fully into the room now. "I care about James. I always have. And yes, I believe Matthews Enterprises needs to be held accountable for its actions. Those aren't mutually exclusive positions." Evelyn's lips curved in a cold smile. "At least you're honest about your motives, more than I can say for some." "What does that mean?" James asked. "It means there's more to this situation than either of you understand." Evelyn's breathing had become more labored, but she pressed on. "The documents. Did you never wonder why they surfaced now, after all these years?" Alexandra moved closer to the bed. "The anonymous package arrived at my office 6 months ago." "Yes, but why? Who sent it? And why to you specifically?" Evelyn's eyes locked with James's. "Have you considered that someone might be targeting Matthews Enterprises deliberately? Someone with access to company archives and personal records? You think it's an inside job?" "I know it is." Evelyn gestured weakly toward the water glass beside her bed. James helped her take a sip before she continued. "Someone with intimate knowledge of both company operations and our family history orchestrated this. The timing, the choice to send the documents to Alexandra, the additional materials provided to the journal, it's all too precise to be coincidental." James exchanged a glance with Alexandra. If not Michael Keaton, then who? I have my suspicions. Evelyn's voice had dropped to a whisper, forcing them to lean closer. There's only one person besides myself who had access to all the relevant information, who knew about my diagnosis, about the birthday party plans, who could have anticipated how events would unfold. Who, Mother? Evelyn's eyes drifted closed momentarily, her strength visibly waning. When she opened them again, her gaze was surprisingly clear. Bernard Davies. James straightened in surprise. Bernard? Your event planner? Bernard has been with our family for 20 years. He's organized every significant Matthews event, been present at countless private meetings, overheard discussions never meant for outsiders. He has access to my homes, my offices. He's practically invisible. Staff don't notice him. Executives don't guard their words around him. But why would he betray you now, after all this time? Because I discovered his embezzlement from the Matthews Foundation. I confronted him about it 3 months ago. Alexandra frowned. You said last night that you allowed his embezzlement to continue because he was useful. A partial truth, Evelyn admitted. I discovered it years ago but let it continue as leverage. When I confronted him recently, I made it clear that exposure of his theft would be my parting gift if he didn't increase his usefulness in other areas. Blackmail, James said flatly. You blackmailed him. I utilized leverage to ensure continued loyalty. But it seems Bernard found another path, revenge through exposing family secrets. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of medical equipment. James tried to process this new information to fit it into the rapidly changing understanding of his family and company. Even if you're right about Bernard, he said finally, it doesn't change the fundamental truth. Father covered up environmental disasters that killed people. You helped him. The company I've been running was built on that deception. Every company has skeletons, James. Every family has secrets. Evelyn reached for his hand. What matters is how you move forward, not in weakness and public self-flagellation, but with strength. Contain the damage, restructure if necessary, but don't tear down what generations have built. A nurse appeared in the doorway. I'm sorry, but Mrs. Matthews needs to rest now. Her vitals are becoming unstable. James stood, still processing everything his mother had revealed. I'll come back later. James. Evelyn's voice had taken on a new urgency. Whatever you decide, remember who you are. A Matthews protects their own, their family, their legacy. I'll remember, he said, though not in the way she intended. In the corridor outside, Alexandra waited while James spoke briefly with the doctor. When he rejoined her, his expression was unreadable. What are you thinking? She asked as they walked toward the elevator. I'm thinking that my mother is manipulating events even from what might be her deathbed. I'm thinking that I don't know who to trust anymore. And I'm thinking that regardless of who leaked those documents or why, the truth they contain can't be ignored. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped inside. As they descended, James turned to Alexandra. Did you mean what you said in there, about still caring for me? Alexandra met his gaze directly. Yes. Despite everything, I never stopped caring. But that doesn't mean I can condone what Matthews Enterprises has done or what your parents did to cover it up. I wouldn't expect you to. James was silent for a moment. The board meeting is at noon. I need to decide how to respond to the journal story. And what have you decided? The elevator reached the ground floor, doors opening to reveal a crowd of reporters gathered in the hospital lobby. Someone had leaked information about Evelyn's condition. Mr. Matthews, is it true your mother has been diagnosed with terminal cancer? James, will you be commenting on the Wall Street Journal expose? Is Matthews Enterprises preparing a legal response to the allegations? James took Alexandra's arm, guiding her through a side exit where his driver was waiting. Only when they were safely in the car did he answer her question. I've decided to tell the truth. All of it. no matter what it costs. The Matthews Enterprises boardroom fell silent as James concluded his presentation. 10 pairs of eyes stared at him in varying states of shock, disbelief, and calculation. The emergency board meeting had been called to address the journal exposé, but none of the directors had anticipated the CEO's proposed response. To summarize, James said, standing at the head of the polished mahogany table, I am recommending full disclosure of all environmental violations committed under previous leadership, establishment of a substantial victim compensation fund, and a complete restructuring of our Southeast Asian operations with enhanced environmental safeguards and local oversight. Michael Keaton, seated to James's right, was the first to respond. James, with all due respect, this approach would devastate shareholder value. The stock is already down 20% in morning trading. This could trigger a complete collapse. I'm aware of the financial implications. Are you? Victoria Winters, the longest-serving board member and a contemporary of his father's, leaned forward. We're talking about potential bankruptcy, thousands of jobs lost, pension funds decimated, all to atone for decisions made decades ago under different leadership and regulatory environments. People died, Victoria. James's voice was steady. Children were born with defects that will affect them for life. Communities were destroyed, and Matthews Enterprises, my father, actively covered it up. Which is regrettable, interjected Howard Chen, representing the company's largest institutional investor. But the statute of limitations has expired on these incidents. Legally, we could mount a strong defense. This isn't about legal liability, it's about moral responsibility. James looked around the table, meeting each director's gaze in turn. My father built this company into a global power by prioritizing profit over people. I've continued that approach, focusing on metrics and market share rather than the human impact of our operations. That ends today. And if the board disagrees with your approach, Victoria asked, her tone cool, then you'll need to find a new CEO. The statement hung in the air, its implications rippling through the room. James Matthews controlled a significant portion of voting shares, but not enough to overrule a united board. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Howard suggested, glancing meaningfully at Michael and the other executives present. No. James's response was immediate. No more private discussions, no more secrecy. Everyone stays. For the next 2 hours, the debate raged. Financial projections were presented showing the devastating impact of James's proposed approach. Legal analyses outlined alternative strategies that would minimize exposure while appearing responsive. PR experts offered messaging frameworks that acknowledged past mistakes without accepting specific responsibility. Through it all, James remained unmoved. When the discussion finally exhausted itself, he called for a vote. Those in favor of my proposed response? 4 hands raised, James's own, Michael's, somewhat reluctantly, and those of 2 younger directors who had joined the board after James became CEO. Those opposed? 6 hands. James nodded, having anticipated the outcome. Then, as discussed, I hereby tender my resignation as Chief Executive Officer of Matthews Enterprises, effective immediately. Victoria's composure slipped. James, don't be hasty. We can find a compromise. There is no compromise on this, Victoria. Either we take full responsibility for our actions, or we continue the cycle of deception my father established. I won't be part of the latter. As James gathered his materials, Howard made one final attempt. Your father built this company through difficult decisions, James. He understood that business sometimes requires hard choices. My father was wrong. James met the older man's gaze directly. And so was I, in trying to emulate him. There's always another way, a better way, than sacrificing human lives for profit. With that, James walked out of the boardroom that had been his domain for the past decade. His executive assistant, David, waited outside, expression concerned. Sir, how did it go? As expected, I've resigned. David's shock was evident. Resigned, but it's done, David. Please have my personal items packed and sent to my home, and cancel my remaining appointments. As James walked toward the elevator, he felt a strange lightness, as if a burden he had carried for years had suddenly lifted. His phone buzzed with a message from Alexandra. How did it go? I resigned, he texted back. The board voted against full disclosure. Her response came quickly. Are you okay? Before he could answer, the elevator doors opened to reveal Bernard Davies, impeccably dressed as always, portfolio tucked under his arm. Mr. Matthews, Bernard said, surprise evident in his voice. I was just coming to see you about the memorial arrangements for your mother. James studied the man who had been a fixture in their family's life for 2 decades, the man his mother had accused of betrayal. My mother is still alive, Bernard. Of course. Poor choice of words. The contingency arrangements, I should say. Given her condition, I thought it prudent to begin preparations. Always efficient. James held the elevator door open. Walk with me. In the privacy of the descending elevator, James turned to face Bernard directly. Was it you, Bernard? Did you send those documents to Alexandra? Bernard's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Mr. Matthews. I think you are. My mother believes you're responsible for leaking information about the Southeast Asian operations, that you did it as revenge for her blackmailing you about the foundation embezzlement. The elevator reached the ground floor, but James pressed the hold button, keeping the doors closed. Bernard was silent for a long moment, weighing his response. Finally, he spoke. Your mother is partially correct. Explain. I did provide the documents to Ms. Harrington and to the journal, but not for the reasons your mother assumes. Then why? Bernard sighed, his perfect posture slipping slightly. I've worked for your family for 20 years, Mr. Matthews. I've witnessed many things. Your father's ruthlessness, your mother's manipulations, the human cost of their ambitions. You had access to all of it, James realized. The meetings, the private conversations. You were invisible to them. The perfect servant is seen but not noticed. Bernard's voice held a bitter edge. I began documenting everything years ago, initially as self-protection, later as evidence. But why act now, after all this time? Because of you. Bernard met his gaze directly. I watched you change after your father died, becoming more like him, more like your mother. The young man who once spoke passionately about modernizing the company, about ethical business practices, was disappearing. So you sent the documents to Alexandra because she was the one person who might reach that young man again, who might remind you of who you once wanted to be. James absorbed this, the pieces falling into place. And the journal? Insurance, in case Ms. Harrington couldn't or wouldn't act on the information. The elevator alarm began to sound, protesting the extended hold. James released the button, and the doors opened to the bustling lobby of Matthews Tower. What happens now? Bernard asked as they stepped out. Now I go see my mother, and then I hold a press conference. Without the board's approval? I'm no longer bound by the board's decisions, Bernard. James extended his hand. Thank you for forcing me to confront the truth. Bernard shook his hand, surprise evident in his expression. What will you tell your mother? Everything, including your reasons. James smiled slightly. She won't like it, but she deserves to know that her machinations ultimately produced the opposite of what she intended. At Mount Sinai, James found his mother asleep, her breathing labored. He sat beside her bed, watching the rise and fall of her chest, thinking about the complex woman who had shaped so much of his life, her strengths and flaws, her love and ambition. When she woke, her eyes immediately focused on him with characteristic sharpness. The board voted against you, she said, reading his expression. Yes, I resigned. Instead of the anger or disappointment he expected, Evelyn smiled faintly. You stood your ground. Good. You're not upset? I raised you to be decisive, James. To lead, not follow. She adjusted herself against the pillows. Though I disagree with your position, I respect your willingness to sacrifice for it. It was Bernard, James said. You were right about that, but not for the reasons you thought. He explained Bernard's true motivations, watching as his mother processed this unexpected twist. So I inadvertently reunited you with Alexandra by inviting her to your party, Evelyn said when he finished. And Bernard used that opening to force a moral crisis that led to your resignation. A bitter laugh escaped her. The best strategic minds can't account for every variable. No, they can't. What will you do now? Hold a press conference. Take personal responsibility for the company's past actions and my own failure to investigate them. Announce the establishment of a victims fund from my personal assets. Evelyn was silent for a moment. And Alexandra? Will she be at your side for this public self-immolation? I haven't asked her. But you want her there. It wasn't a question. James nodded. You still love her. Again, not a question. I never stopped. Evelyn sighed, closing her eyes briefly. I was wrong about her, James. Not about her unsuitability as a corporate wife. I still maintain that your values were fundamentally incompatible with the company's needs. But I was wrong to see her as merely an adversary to be neutralized. She was my wife, Mother, the woman I chose. Yes. And in trying to separate you from her, I inadvertently pushed you toward becoming something you never wanted to be. Evelyn's gaze was unusually reflective. Perhaps that's been my greatest failure as a mother, not seeing you clearly enough, not respecting your choices. The admission stunned James. In all his life, he had never heard Evelyn acknowledge a personal failing. It's not too late, he said quietly, for us to understand each other better. But it is too late for many things. Evelyn's expression turned resolute. James, listen to me. Whatever you decide about the press conference, about your future, make it your decision, not your father's, not mine, and not Alexandra's. I am. Good. She reached for his hand. Now go. You have a press conference to prepare for, and I need to rest. As James stood to leave, Evelyn added, I won't be here to see how this unfolds. My doctors have been clear about that. But I hope you find the path that brings you peace, even if it's not the one I would have chosen for you. It was as close to a blessing as Evelyn Matthews was capable of giving. James leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gesture of affection rarely exchanged between them. Thank you, Mother. Outside the hospital, James found Alexandra waiting, a paper cup of coffee in her hands. How is she? She asked. Dying, but still very much herself. He smiled slightly. She figured out that I resigned before I said a word. Of course she did. Alexandra handed him the coffee. What happens now? Now I hold a press conference. Take responsibility for what Matthews Enterprises did under my father's leadership and my own. Announce the establishment of a victim compensation fund. The board won't support that. I don't need their support. I have enough personal assets to make a meaningful difference. They began walking, no particular destination in mind. The autumn air was crisp, Central Park's trees ablaze with color around them. And after the press conference? Alexandra asked. I haven't thought that far ahead. Yes, you have. She stopped, turning to face him. You've been planning your escape from Matthews Enterprises for years, James. You just never had the courage to execute it. He stared at her, startled by the insight. What makes you say that? The art collection in your office, all landscapes of remote, wild places. The books on your shelves about people who walked away from conventional success to build something meaningful. The conservation foundation you established quietly, separate from the Matthews name. You noticed all that? I noticed everything about you, James, even after we separated. They resumed walking, a new understanding forming between them. "My mother thinks I still love you," James said after a while. "And do you?" "Yes." The admission was simpler than he expected. "I never stopped, even when I convinced myself our divorce was necessary, even when I threw myself into becoming the CEO my father wanted me to be. You were always there, in the back of my mind, reminding me of a different path." Alexandra was quiet for several steps. "I never stopped loving you either. But love wasn't our problem. No, it wasn't. Our problem was that I wasn't brave enough to stand up for what mattered. To you, to me, to the communities affected by my family's company. And now? Now I'm trying to find that courage." James stopped at a park bench, gesturing for her to join him. "I can't undo what my father did, or my own complicity in continuing his systems. But I can acknowledge it. I can make amends. And I can try to build something better. That sounds like the James Matthews I married. He's still in here somewhere." James smiled ruefully. A bit battered, a lot wiser, but still hoping to make a difference. Alexandra reached for his hand, her touch tentative but warm. "I'd like to get to know that James again." "Even after everything?" "Especially after everything." She squeezed his hand. "The press conference, when is it?" 4 o'clock. I've already called the PR team. Would you like me to be there?" James considered the question carefully. "Yes, but not standing beside me. This is my responsibility to bear alone." "I understand." His phone buzzed with a message from the hospital. James read it, his expression darkening. "My mother's taken a turn for the worse. They don't think she'll last the night. Go to her. The press conference can wait." "No, it can't." James stood, decision made. "This is exactly what Evelyn Matthews would want, for me to prioritize her over the truth, over doing what's right. I'll visit her after I've made my statement." Alexandra rose to stand beside him. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." James checked his watch. "I need to prepare. Will I see you afterward?" "Yes. Call me when you're done." They parted at the park entrance. Alexandra heading toward Brooklyn, James toward the Midtown Hotel where he had arranged to hold the press conference. As his car navigated through traffic, James rehearsed what he would say, the acknowledgement of past wrongs, the commitment to making amends, the resignation that would allow him to act independently of the board's constraints. It wouldn't be easy. The business press would eviscerate him. Former colleagues would distance themselves. The carefully constructed Matthews legacy would be forever altered. But for the first time in years, James felt authentically aligned with his own values. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was his path, not his father's, not his mother's, not even Alexandra's. At the hotel, a crowd of reporters had already gathered. James straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the car into the barrage of questions and camera flashes. "Mr. Matthews, will you be addressing the journal allegations?" "James, has the board authorized your statement? Is it true your mother is critically ill?" He moved through them with a calm he didn't entirely feel, making his way to the podium set up in the hotel's conference room. The cameras focused on him, the room falling silent in anticipation. "Good afternoon," James began. "My name is James Matthews. Until 2 hours ago, I was the Chief Executive Officer of Matthews Enterprises. Today, I speak to you not as a corporate leader, but as an individual taking personal responsibility for actions that can no longer remain hidden." As he continued, laying bare the truths his father and mother had worked so hard to conceal, James felt a curious sense of liberation. The very exposure his parents had feared most, the public acknowledgement of their sins, was becoming his path to freedom. Halfway across the city, in her Brooklyn apartment, Alexandra watched the press conference live on her laptop. Pride and sadness mingled as she observed James's unflinching delivery, his willingness to finally stand in his truth regardless of the cost. Whether this moment would lead to reconciliation between them remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: The man speaking with such clarity and conviction was the James Matthews she had fallen in love with, the one she had always believed still existed beneath the corporate facade. And Evelyn Matthews, watching from her hospital bed despite the doctor's concern about her agitation, felt a complex mixture of emotions as her son dismantled the legacy she had spent a lifetime building. Anger, certainly, disappointment. But beneath these, a grudging respect for his courage and a dawning recognition that perhaps in the end, he had become a better person than either of his parents had been. The birthday party that was meant to be her final manipulation had indeed changed everything, but not in the way she had intended. By bringing Alexandra back into James's orbit, she had inadvertently catalyzed his return to authenticity. As consciousness began to fade, Evelyn's last coherent thought was that she had finally succeeded in her most fundamental goal, raising a son strong enough to make his own way in the world, even if that way was nothing like the path she had envisioned for him. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time, just click on the screen.